Just give me one quick sec because I'm going to switch over to my notes. There we go. So thank you and welcome. Thanks for joining. Want to welcome Dr. Jennifer Furin and some of her colleagues from Village Healthworks. Really great to have you with us today. I'm going to start by offering a land acknowledgement from where I stand, and then I will just share a little bit about what you can expect from today's webinar and then pass it on to my colleagues. The land on which I work is the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg Nation, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. It is home to the Mississaugas of Scugog, Hiawatha and Alderville First Nations, and the Métis Nation. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabeg and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. The treaties that were signed for this parcel of land are collectively known as the Williams Treaties of 1923. I am grateful to call this land home, and I'm committed to a journey of learning, listening, and building right relationships through care and respect. So welcome again to everybody. We are scheduled to be 90 minutes. We will have some time for questions and answers. So, but we do ask you to hold on to your questions or type them into the chat until after Dr. Furin's presentation. We're going to start with prayer. We'll then hear a little bit about the Resilience Fund and an update from Carolyn Cummins, Director of Fundraising and Supporter Relations. Following this, Bart Dickinson, who's alongside Hope's Monitoring, Evaluation, and Planning Coordinator, just mix that up, from alongside Hope, and he will talk about the history and partnership that we've had with Village Healthworks, and he'll introduce Dr. Jennifer Furin, who is a board member with Village Healthworks, and she'll be talking about the cannot speak. Maragara Misa project. We'll then have some time for Q&A and we will close with prayer. So with that, I will turn it over to Suzanne for prayer.
Thanks, Kim. And that was Kim Umbach, who's our volunteer coordinator. And I'm Suzanne Ramsey, the Public Engagement Program Coordinator at Alongside Hope. I'm going to offer a prayer that was written by Bishop Dion Johnson, Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Missouri. Let us pray. Give unto us, O God, the gift of now. Now is the time to advocate for justice. Now is the time to speak truth to power. Now is the time to fight hatred. Now is the time to stand with the outcast. Now is the time to resist the power of evil. Now is the time to make no peace with oppression. Now is the time to love our neighbors. Now is the time to walk humbly with our God. Now is the time to say no to discord. Now is the gift that we have been given. O God, walk with us in the now. Amen. And I'll pass over to Carolyn to tell us a bit about the Resilience Fund.
Thanks, Suzanne. So I'm Carolyn Cummins. I'm the Director of Fundraising and Supporter Relations for Alongside Hope. And Furin, you mentioned the name, so you actually gave me a good segue, because what I was going to start with is that when we started with the name Alongside Hope, we absolutely could not have imagined how much the world would actually be in need of hope right now. and in particular with the impact of the cuts from USAID and from other governments. So I'm not going to go into detail about those cuts. I think a lot of you already know about that, and we have a whole other webinar that we can point you to on that. But just to say that prior to the cuts, the US was providing $71.9 billion in international development aid for humanitarian and development work, and that has pretty much all been cut. So alongside Hope, we are continuing to support the partners and the programs that we already had in our plan that we've committed to, but we're also pivoting to provide additional support to partners who have experienced these funding cuts. And to be clear, it's not alongside Hope programs that have been cut because we weren't receiving funding from USAID, but it's other programs that our partners were implementing that have been impacted. So in April, we decided to launch a new appeal, and we called it the Resilience Fund. And when a generous donor of ours heard about this and heard about the devastating impact of the cuts on our partners, they came forward and offered us a match of $250,000, up to $250,000 for all gifts received for the Resilience Fund by June the 30th. Now, that date is to be revised if we have a postal strike. I'm watching the news every 10 minutes to see if that's going to happen. But right now the date is June 30th, but stay tuned. Right now, we have raised $122,494. That's right up to the minute. Jennifer's in the office processing donations today, so that's going up. So we're almost halfway there, which is really encouraging. So thanks to everybody who has already supported the Resilience Fund and is helping us get to meet that match and have a full $500,000 to provide funding for the programs. Some of the programs that we're going to be supporting, you're going to hear about Village Healthworks, and that's the focus of today. But a couple of others, we're supporting our partner Church World Service, who works in Tanzania. They've been running a program for refugees who are being resettled to the United States. And that program was also cut. So the US resettlement program for refugees was suspended. And from the camp in Tanzania, there were 10 families who had actually already left the camp and were ready to travel to the States. They had said their goodbyes, they'd given their possessions away, they'd left the program, and they were turned back to the camp and had to return with nothing. And so Church World Service has been supporting those families. So we're supporting them in doing that, and also supporting other families who were also in the resettlement stream and getting ready to go, and whose lives have now been completely upended. And so they're providing a lot of psychological support and other supports to those families as they figure out what their next steps are now that they no longer have a hope of restarting their lives in the United States. Very, very difficult. We have a video on our YouTube channel. I can pop it into the chat that has some interviews with some of those refugees who have been impacted. Another partner that we're supporting is Rape Hurts Foundation in Uganda. So we're working with them on a proposal to provide support for victims and survivors of human trafficking, gender-based violence, modern-day slavery. So they'll be providing essential services like counseling, medical support, shelter, food, and also considering awareness and outreach initiatives. As well, part of the Resilience Fund has been an advocacy campaign. So on the Resilience Fund webpage, which I'll also pop into the chat after I'm done talking, we have a letter builder where you can create a letter to your member of parliament and or the Secretary of State, the new Secretary of State for International Development. And the suggested key points of the letter are to talk about why you believe in international aid and why it's important for our government to support stability and prosperity through continuing and also increasing international assistance. So I will pop those couple of links that I mentioned into the chat, and I will turn it back over. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. That's very helpful, and do look for those links in the chat. I think next up is Bart, who's going to tell us a bit about the history of our partnership and engagement with Village Healthworks and introduce Dr. Furin. Bart.
Let me just get my screen shared here. Can everybody see my screen? I should be floating around on your screen a little bit here. Can you see my notes on the screen, or can you only see?
We can see your notes as well.
Oh, you can see my notes. Well, that's not what's supposed to happen. Let's see here. Let's go into that. When I share my screen, I'm not quite sure. Here, let me just get this right. There we go.
That's good. No notes.
You can't see the notes now?
Nope.
Perfect. All right, great. Hopefully I'm here in the corner of this screen. Thank you for that. Apologies for the technical glitch. And thanks so very much for that intro, Suzanne, and greetings to everyone joining us today. My name is Bart Dickinson, and I am the Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation Coordinator for Alongside Hope and the Primary Project Coordinator for this exciting partnership with our incredible partner, Village Healthworks, that just kicked off at the beginning of this month. I should note that I'm joining you today from the city of Ottawa and the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. It's really great to see some familiar faces and some new ones here as well today. As Carolyn noted, when the cuts to USAID funding were announced, Alongside Hope immediately reached out to its partner network to discern what impacts the cuts would have on operations, where there were clear stress points, shortages, or urgent needs. And our longstanding partner in Burundi, Village Healthworks, or VHW for short, came to us with a proposal to provide a long-term solution to address an urgent, imminent countrywide shortage of ready-to-use therapeutic food supplies, RUTFs, which are special food packets used to treat severe acute malnutrition in children under 5 years of age, which we're going to talk a lot about today. But to provide some background to this partnership, some of you on the call might recognize that Alongside Hope, or PWRDF at the time, first partnered with Village Healthworks in 2016 for our Global Affairs Canada-funded 4-country All Mothers and Children Count project, after being introduced to us through our friends and Rwandan All Mothers collaborators, Partners in Health. The 4-year All Mothers project was a holistic maternal, newborn, and child health and nutrition project, which evolved to provide COVID-19 support at the beginning of the pandemic. With an ultimate outcome of reducing maternal, under 5, and infant mortality, the initiative supported training for health workers and practitioners, medical equipment, construction, nutritional support, and also helped support VHW's vital network of community health workers, all of which continue to support Village Healthworks operations to this day. The Village Healthworks team delivered some incredible results over our 5-year engagement. Here on the left, you can see a community health worker. These are the boots on the ground, a decentralized network of health workers checking on community health at a household level. On the right side, you see a healthcare practitioner delivering quality care at the hospital in Kigutu. Some of the important impacts that this team helped deliver: over 96% of pregnant women in the region received the recommended 4 antenatal care visits, compared to a 37% national average. Births attended by skilled health personnel in the region went from a baseline of 41% to over 97% after 5 years. And that's kudos to the door-to-door work of the community health workers that Village Healthworkers uses. By the end of the project, 98% of mothers and children under 5 were sleeping under insecticide-treated nets, from a baseline of 77%. And really importantly, it was a sexual and reproductive health project. We saw near tripling of expressed confidence in community members' knowledge of sexual health and comfort in discussing sexual health between partners and between adolescents, which is really promising in a quite conservative culture. And really important to today's conversation, in AMCC, or the All Mothers and Children Count project, Village Healthworks actually doubled the rate of screening for malnutrition for children under 5. When COVID-19 hit, we rapidly pivoted our efforts to help provide personal protective equipment and train community health workers in proper engagement protocols and distancing during the height of the pandemic and lockdown protocols, maintaining the gains from All Mothers and Children Count, and ensuring that health services continued to be available and accessible during lockdown protocols, and that children could continue to be screened for malnutrition and anemia. And that screening is so very important. Village Healthworks has long been invested in an approach to health that embraces the key pillars of nutrition and food security, with All Mothers supporting Village Healthworks' network of community health workers with training and supplies, and supporting regular community engagement events and screening for malnutrition, stunting, and wasting in the community. It should be noted that all of this All Mothers work was being delivered with a backdrop of the ongoing construction of a major hospital, Deo's original vision, the Women's Health Pavilion. As you can see, what started as a hole in the ground really started to come together by Mid-All Mothers. And you can see how beautiful the site is on the hill overlooking Lake Tanganyika. It's been really personally inspiring to be able to watch the evolution of this organization and the community through the construction of the Women's Health Pavilion. Alongside Hope came in just as they were breaking ground on this massive, ambitious project. And I won't spoil anything, but just wait till you see what it looks like today when Dr. Furin speaks. Deo was instrumental, the founder of Village Healthworks, in sowing a seed and starting a movement, but I'm sure he would tell you that it was the community who really should be celebrated. Village Healthworks' very meaningful and emotional connection to the community is obvious. The community is engaged and informed in all of VHW's projects and decisions. You can tell that the community doesn't feel like they're part of VHW. They know they're part of VHW, and they're integral to its success. And if you'll permit me, just anecdotally, for example, the first year I visited Village Healthworks, the road to the hospital was rough and treacherous at points coming off the main highway. The next year I showed up, it was smoother than the main highway from the capital, 3 hours away in Bujumbura. And I recall asking, if you know how much it costs to do this kind of work, it would have been exorbitant to flatten that road. And I asked how much it cost, and I was told there wasn't a cost. It was the community that collaborated and mobilized to systematically smooth out and level the road. So people needing to reach the clinic and ambulances that were, constantly having to replace tires could arrive safely at the hospital and quickly. The community invests in the success of Village Healthworks, and in turn, this community has blossomed and radiated change, hope, and resilience. So having had the privilege myself to visit the community and Village Healthworks a few times, you learn to always expect to see positive change, community problem solving at work, and wide smiles. But one thing always remains constant. You always see a lot of children. Over half the population in Burundi is under the age of 18, and the country suffers from some of the highest incidences of malnutrition in the world. Article 25 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights ensconces that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of themselves and of their family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond their control. And it strikes me that nothing could be beyond their control than politicized, abrupt cuts from a faraway place that disrupt an important, life-saving, vital supply chain of therapeutic foods that are used to save the lives of children under 5. Children who are already living in a perpetual cycle where demand exceeded the available supply. Malnutrition robs children of their futures, and RUTFs, ready-to-use therapeutic food supplies, provided they are available, have extremely high success rates, 90% plus, and are vital in the community management of acute malnutrition. It's important to note that this shock to the supply chain for ready-to-use therapeutic foods has already cost children's lives, and that it is simply not an acceptable outcome in our modern era when it should be easier to offer a hand than it ever has been before. Breaking cycles of dependence demands local solutions. If we can help empower local communities to take advantage of their own resources, we build resilience. And so with a multidimensional collaborative partnership between committed partners and a motivated community, we will build a local resilience by helping support Village Healthworks by building a domestic production facility for ready-to-use therapeutic food in Burundi. The new project entitled Magara Meza, which translates roughly to live well in Kirundi, is a 650,000 Canadian dollar project that alongside Hope is contributing 140,000 Canadian dollars to. We're going to develop a business plan and build an RUTF production facility, equip it with the requisite processing equipment. We'll use an integrated community-led, community-owned approach, training community members in machine operation, maintenance, upkeep, financial literacy, and business management, and borrowing from the technical expertise and deep understanding and knowledge from experienced existing producers of ready-to-use therapeutic foods that we have in partnership and collaboration with this initiative. The facility will support local farmers, buy domestic produce, groundnuts, oil, milk, sugar, with an objective of long-term reduction on dependence on imports and single-sourced RUTF, of which is USAID was the primary supplier in Burundi. This is a partnership that brings community on-the-ground knowledge, global technical expertise, and the experience and excellence of the VHW team, and the care and compassion of well-meaning supporters here in Canada and the US investing in community resilience. But I'm talking too much. There's so much to unpack and get into about the context where we are today, and we are so very blessed to be joined by Dr. Jennifer Furin, who's been a tireless advocate for global health for decades. Dr. Furin is an infectious diseases doctor and medical anthropologist who has worked in global health since 1995. She spent 15 years with Partners in Health, and another 15 years with Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders, working all over the world to improve the lives and health of vulnerable populations. She joined the board of directors for Village Healthworks in 2023, and she joyfully makes routine visits to Burundi to support the projects there. Many of you perhaps read her article in Time magazine, which has been an important catalyst in raising awareness and bringing this partnership together. Without further ado, it is my distinct pleasure and privilege to welcome Dr. Furin to today's webinar. Thank you, merci, and Marco Zechana. Doctor, the floor is yours.
Wow, thank you so much, Bart, for that kind introduction. And thank you, Carolyn and Suzanne and Kim and everyone who's been involved in planning this webinar and participating in this webinar. You know, these are definitely dark times. And I think all of us at Village Healthworks feel the same weight that many of you feel about projects that have been invested in for years. Really being at risk right now, all these hard-fought gains. But I was really struck by Suzanne's prayer at the beginning about, you know, now is the time when it feels very dark for us to stand up to that darkness with our hope, with our collective action, with our beliefs. And I just want to start by saying how wonderful it is to be on this call with all of you today. I do have several of my colleagues in Burundi who joined. They would be far better placed to give this presentation than I would, but unfortunately the internet is very unstable in Burundi sometimes, and so we didn't want to frustrate everyone and have the internet cutting in and out. So, but I am representing their decades of a collective work, and I do so humbly, but also with a huge amount of pride and amazement. You know, I've spent 30 years working in global health with some incredible organizations, Partners in Health, Doctors Without Borders, and I joined the board of directors at Village Healthworks because what I see in this organization is something that I've never seen anywhere before, and that is this deep connection with the community. You know, as Bart pointed out, nothing happens in Village Healthworks without the community. And I would say Village Healthworks is the community. And so for the next little bit of time, I'd like to share with you all a little bit about what's happening in our community. And just really to thank you for the solidarity that you've built with your collective action and that you so generously share with us. So speaking of share, I'm going to try to share my screen. And, you know, I hope you can all see it right now. It's okay? Excellent. I also tend to be a fast talker. So please let me know if I'm going too quickly or if anything happens in terms of like breakdown of my mic or my slides. So yeah, so today what I wanted to share with you, and Bart just introduced it so beautifully, that Village Healthworks is really committed to a sustainable and dignified approach to health for all. Sorry. And we are centered and work in a country called Burundi. For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of traveling or working in Burundi, the country is located really in the heart of Central Africa. So we're a tiny country. We're bordered by Rwanda to the north, the Congo to the west, and then Tanzania to the east. We're right on the shores of Lake Tanganyika, which is one of Africa's Great Lakes. And it's really a beautiful country. Burundi's landmass is roughly half the size of Nova Scotia. So, you know, I really thank everyone for pointing this out to me because I would have given you some American references. But from a Canadian side, the land is about half the size of Nova Scotia. But Burundi hosts a population of almost 14 million people. So if you could imagine that in half of Nova Scotia, there's a lot of pressure on the land. And resources are scarce. The capital city of Burundi is called Bujumbura. It's a great city, but most of the population lives in rural areas, about 85% of the population. And the population really gets by on farming and fishing. So there's a lot of subsistence agriculture, as well as subsistence fishing that happens. Burundi does export some coffee and tea, but it's probably not something you've encountered on the shelves because it's a very tiny producer of these things. Burundi has a lot of other things, though, that they've exported. And for those of you in the audience who might be musicians, there's the Burundians are incredible drummers. It's one of the most amazing parts of life in Burundi is the skill that goes into drumming. And they have a very characteristic beat that they use for the drumming. It's very different than the beat you hear anywhere. And it's actually the famous Burundi beat was actually incorporated a lot into, different musical genres that have been recorded, including, rap music and some soul and funk. And so I'm not musically inclined, but it's kind of like a 2/3 with an extra beat in there. And when you're in Burundi, and you're fortunate enough to be around people doing drumming, like it catches your heart, like you thrum in time. And these are just some pictures from actually our first graduation at the Kigutu International Academy, which was a cause of great celebration. So the Burundi beat is something that you may have heard about. And it is a stunningly beautiful country. Like, it's just breathtaking to take in the sights of Burundi. It's green mountains. We're fortunate in Kigutu, which is a very rural area. Our hospital is based 7 miles away from the nearest paved road. And that was a deliberate choice, because most of the services for health are concentrated in the capital, where services are more straightforward to access. But from our hospital, you can look out across Lake Tanganyika and see the fishermen hard at work. And they fish at night, actually, much of the time. And, it's just a stunningly beautiful scene when the fish are running and the fishermen are out there at night. You just see thousands of lights bobbing in Lake Tanganyika. And it's almost as if the heavens have come down to earth in terms of stars and things. But it's a fishing population. And it's a beautiful country, but it is a country that has had an incredibly difficult history. So I put up this cover from Time magazine. Some of you may be old enough to remember the horrors of the 1994 genocide that took place in Burundi's neighbor to the north, Rwanda. And there was a quote from a missionary that was on the cover of Time magazine during this period that said, "There are no devils left in hell. They are all in Rwanda." But that wasn't true, because many of those quote unquote devils and much of that violence had spilled over in the south into Burundi, and in fact had been going on for many, many years. The intensity wasn't as strong in Burundi in those immediate months as it was in Rwanda. But there was civil war in Burundi from 1993 to 2005. And again, most recently from 2015 to 2018, more than 500,000 people died in this violence. And it was really, again, you'll hear different reasons people talk about tribal violence or ethnic violence, but much of what was happening in Rwanda and Burundi was really fueled by poverty, lack of opportunity, and lack of land. But unlike Rwanda, where there was a significant investment of funds from the global community and a significant amount of attention, Burundi really had very limited investment, and very little help from the outside was given to Burundi to help the country recover. And so, I often find when talking with my friends and colleagues, they'll say, "Oh, it's like Rwanda." And in some ways, yes, but in many ways, no, because After the devastation of the 1990s, Rwanda received a lot of partnership and support, and Burundi had almost nothing in return. So this is a beautiful country where deep poverty persists. I've worked all over the world, and I've seen some really catastrophic situations. What I've seen in Burundi just the last couple of years is as bad as, if not worse, than what I've seen in many places. Um, children who lack really very basic things, shoes, clothes. The picture of the two little ones there shows a typical house, which, during a raining time or raining season, which I think they're in the middle of right now, you can see that this would be a place that offered very little shelter. People are on the move frequently. Right now, there's a lot of violence happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which borders Burundi to the west. And there are many refugees who are coming over into Burundi as well. So it is a place where you will meet some of the most wonderful people you'll ever meet and see some incredible things, but see some really heartbreaking and devastating things as well. And it's in this context that the founder of Village Healthworks, Deo Gracias Nizionkiza, was born, actually raised, and spent much of his adult life living and working to try to make things better. Deo is from Kigutu, which is the community where Village Healthworks is based, and worked really hard in a context that was difficult to attend medical school and to be a doctor who could help address many of the gaping holes in healthcare access that he saw growing up in his community. And Deo was just beginning his practice during a flare of horrible violence in Kigutu. And in fact, an attempt was made on Deo's life. He only survived the attempt on his life by hiding under a bed, and then had to flee so that he could survive, leaving everything he knew, his hopes, his dreams, his families, his plans for the future, and simply try to survive. Deo can tell you his story better than I can, but sometimes I worry that Deo is too humble when he tells his story, because he's not a man who is a braggart or proud. But a book was actually written about what happened to Deo by the Pulitzer Prize-winning author Tracy Kidder. The book is called Strength in What Remains. And for those of you who are interested in reading or learning more about Deo's story, I'll direct you there. But needless to say, Deo ended up basically walking across most of Africa, boarding a boat in Western Africa, and ending up in the United States, living as a homeless person in Central Park. And, for a young man who was a doctor in his community, while he was grateful to be alive, this was a devastating change of circumstances. But Deo was fortunate enough to meet a kind nun, a sister, who, sort of noticed his spirit and his drive to try and do well in New York City, and heard his story and listened with an open heart, and ended up connecting Deo with some friends in New York City who helped him to find stable housing and actually enter school at Columbia University, where Deo excelled. And he was always driven by a passion for learning so that he could return to Burundi, and try not only to serve his community, but to heal the deep divisions that were there. To me, when I think about this, I'm just touched by how much this was a story of forgiveness. We talk a lot about forgiveness in different communities, and it seems like it's a concept, but Deo put active forgiveness into practice and ended up in medical school at Dartmouth, pursuing his degree in public health, and then returning to Kigutu to found Village Healthworks. And I mean, this is an extraordinary story, and one I think that inspires all of us who are involved with Village Healthworks, but also the community. And, when Deo returned to Kigutu, nothing had changed in terms of the absence, not lack, but absence of healthcare that he saw in Kigutu, but really throughout the entire country, where basic conditions, the picture of the little boy with the hole in his face started as a simple cavity. And these things progress. This is a condition called noma. Where his entire face was eaten away because he couldn't access basic health care. There's a picture of a young man in the corner there dying and skeletal, and then the picture of the chair is what a standard hospital looked like in Burundi when Deo went back. And so these are very difficult and painful things to see, but the lack of dignity and the lack of healing that can happen in such a place is something that needs to be countered with more than just medical knowledge, but with deep solidarity. And so just some numbers to give you about the context in Burundi today, and what Village Healthworks is dealing with is that Burundi has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world. So these are women who die because of pregnancy, childbirth, or shortly after childbirth. And approximately 548 women die for every 100,000 babies that are born alive. And if you compare this to Canada, the rate in Canada is 11 per 100,000. And most of these deaths are completely preventable. And they happen because of limited access to healthcare facilities and skilled birth attendants. Some of this is because there's an extreme healthcare worker shortage in Burundi. People like Deo are very rare. They don't go back. If you're often trained as a physician, you leave the country. So Burundi has about one physician for every 20,865 people. And again, to compare this to Canada, where I know, there are still long waiting lists and delays in getting healthcare. In Canada, there's one physician for every 410 people. But just this number doesn't tell the whole story, because in Burundi, most of the healthcare providers are in Bujumbura, in the capital city. In almost all the hospitals in Burundi, people have to pay prior to receiving care. So you can't just pitch up and hope that someone will take care of you and serve you with a bill later. You could be bleeding out in the street, and if you can't pay, you're not getting into the hospital. And in fact, the first project Deo and I worked on together, I was a medical resident at Partners in Health, and Deo was working with Paul Farmer and others in the organization. It was a project just to try to document this, because in Burundi, what Deo reported to me was that many people who couldn't pay their bills at the hospital were kept as prisoners in the hospital. So it wasn't just that they couldn't get care. If they came in and they could pay that initial cost, if they couldn't pay the final bill, they were kept as prisoners. They weren't allowed out of the hospital, and they weren't fed. They weren't given medical care. And so we worked together just to prepare a report and submit it to Amnesty International around this. A hospital as a jail is a really, it's hard to fathom, but that's what was happening. And that's what drove Deo and many others to start with Village Healthworks. So Village Healthworks, again, this is a community-led initiative focused on global health equity. And these are not just words that the organization says, but it's been the deeply rooted principle of Village Healthworks since its inception. This is a picture of Deo meeting with the community to hear from them what they needed and what they wanted, and to start providing those things. And so Village Healthworks has always been an organization that worked in response to the community needs. And so the community said, we need a health center, right? And so as Bart so wonderfully showed, they pitched in and started building this health center. And so over the years, there are tens of thousands of people who've been served by the health center. But even though the health center was great and had a lot of services for people, it still wasn't really the dignified organization that Deo and others dreamed of. And people who needed higher levels of care were actually had to be referred to some of those disastrous hospitals that I showed you. And so, these are just some pictures of the intrepid staff, looking at x-rays by the sun, working by lantern light to provide the best care that they could to people. But it became clear that a hospital was needed. And as Bart showed, a labor of love ensued in trying to build this hospital at Village Healthworks. So this is just a slide showing a little bit of the journey of the organization. So in 2006, it was officially founded. In 2007, the outpatient clinic opened. Community health workers have always been the heart of the project, paid, trained, and supported, including through an immense and incredible partnership with Alongside Hope. And all this time, the ambition was to try to build a hospital, which was no small undertaking without a road. But there was a lot of people didn't believe that this could be done. Right. Or why would you do this? Just weigh those kids, just, treat their malnutrition, just vaccinate them. But a community like Kigutu needs a hospital like any community. And so through Deo's persistence and a lot of generous donor support, the hospital opened in 2023. And in 2024, Village Healthworks continues to serve with an annual operating budget of around 10 million. So this is the pictures of the hospital. It is a stunning place. It is dignified. And again, for me, having worked all over the world, I'm so proud to be part of this organization and to offer this kind of medical care in Kigutu to people. It's probably the best hospital in all of Burundi. And we not only draw individuals from our catchment area, but from all over the country and then from outside of the country as well. So it's an incredible achievement, and many hands went into this. So these are just some pictures of my colleagues and team members doing surgery, delivering babies safely through cesarean section when needed, and just offering people things that I don't think anyone from this community could have dreamed of, let alone thought they could have been part of building. And in the building of this organization, I have to say there's been tremendous community healing. One of the things that Deo often talks about is how do you bring together a community that's been divided by violence, that, that needs more than just medical care. And I think Deo's example of healing and forgiveness is one that many people model, but by working together to build something that serves people, I think bonds have been restored and the community has a lot more trust. And in a world that's driven with a lot of despair and a lot of conflict these days, I think seeing this, right, a collective project where we build something together can be healing is also something that I take very to heart from Village Healthworks. So based on, there are just some numbers to give you here. So about 40,000 patient consultations at the health center and hospital, but 91,000 home visits from those amazing community health workers that Bart talked about. And they really are the backbone of all that's done at Village Healthworks. Because of their work, because of the partnership with Alongside Hope, we've seen a 50% reduction in infant mortality in our catchment area, which is really amazing. We now can offer state-of-the-art surgical care with more than 4,000 life-saving surgeries happening annually. When I was last there in February, there was a young boy whose face had been burned by hot oil. He was a young boy who had to leave his home to go work to try to earn some income for the family, and the hot oil splashed up on his face. This child would have been disfigured. He probably would have died. And instead, our surgeons were able to clean the wounds, to do skin grafting, and he can be a normal 11-year-old again. It's unbelievable. I could go on for hours telling you stories. But childhood malnutrition has always been something that we prioritize tackling in Burundi and in our catchment area. And last year we screened more than 46,000 children under 5 for malnutrition. And in our official catchment area, this allowed us to have a 1% global acute malnutrition rate, because we not only screened them, but we actually were able to address and provide food and food supplements for the children found to be malnourished. So these are just some numbers that we actually wanted to share with you all, because as you know, in January of this year, there was a president inaugurated in the United States who seems to be driven by personal gain and a sense of cruelty in addressing global health issues. I'm ashamed to say that my country seems to have gone to a place where it's all about what's in it for me, and how does this serve me. And so one of the first acts of the new US government was to completely cut USAID and most foreign aid. This happened overnight with no preparation, no warning, and we knew it was going to be bad, but I don't think any of us imagined how bad it was going to be. And this happened in Village Healthworks at a time when the needs were rising. So just to show you, between January, February, and March of 2024 and January, February, and March 2025, the total number of patients coming to us seeking surgical care, I mean, more than it, it was 6 times higher. And the same is true for overall hospital services. So our bed occupancy rate went up from 33% to 76%. Some of this is simply because, word got out that there was a great hospital providing free care for people. But some of this was because starting in January, February, and March, when the USAID funding cuts happened, other facilities and hospitals closed. So our organization was committed to staying open and doing our best to respond to the needs. But you can see it was like a perfect storm. The demand went up when the support went down. And I just want to be clear, Village Healthworks wasn't receiving direct funding from USAID, but we received a lot of commodities through our partnership with the government of Burundi that they were getting from USAID. So we were completely dependent on the government of Burundi to provide nutritional support, TB care, HIV care, et cetera. And then when all of that stopped, we were suddenly asked to fill those gaps. So, and then again, this is just a linear graph showing the same thing, that our average daily census was more than double at a time when these cuts were happening. And this was true not only in the hospital, but outside of the hospital as well. And these are just showing our average outpatient clinic consultations, which doubled in 2025. And again, a lot of this is stemming from increased need and lack of access to other services in the country, who did have to shutter their doors when the USAID funding cuts happened. So Bart showed this, but I like to show it again as well, because Village Healthworks isn't just about providing healthcare services. We are a holistic organization that believes healthcare goes hand in hand with education, community engagement, nutrition and food security, and then, local operations. And I know we've had great success partnering with Alongside Hope in these areas as well in the past. And so we continue in these dark and difficult times to espouse a holistic model. And we believe we have to, because that's what the people in Kigutu need. But it's been hard. It's been a really hard time globally, and particularly in Burundi, where the cuts are leading to direct deaths in very vulnerable populations. So malnutrition, as you all know, is a major challenge already in Burundi. 54% of the children in Burundi are stunted, right? And stunting is a term we use to show that children are chronically malnourished. So it isn't just that there was one bad year or one bad crop cycle. This is ongoing, and 54% is one of the highest rates in the entire world, including in settings where there's active and ongoing conflict. In Burundi, almost 500,000 children under 5 suffer from something that's called severe acute malnutrition. So these are kids who don't have enough calories to eat, and their bodies start consuming them themselves. And so the picture here of this young baby shows a child with something called marasmus, which is sort of the picture we're all used to seeing of sort of a skeletal child that doesn't have enough to eat. But I do want to mention that even among older children and adolescents, and even among adults, about half of Burundi's population faces food insecurity. So, like, these numbers, they're some of the worst in the world. I was in Burundi when we found out about the USAID funding cuts. I was actually rounding with my colleagues in the pediatric wards the day that this was announced. And these are just some pictures of some of the children who we were treating in our hospital that day. These pictures were taken by our colleagues Robin Bowman and Prinja Senga, who's a young Burundian photographer. And this young boy is suffering from a kind of malnutrition that we see, but that it isn't the same as the skeletal baby who has something called marasmus. This child has something called kwashiorkor, and his legs are swollen because his heart can't pump properly. He doesn't have any protein. So maybe his mom, who's pictured there next to him, who was struggling to feed all of her children, she finds a little corn or a little sorghum to give him. But because of the protein loss, he can't keep his fluid in his body, in his blood vessels. It goes into the legs. He goes into heart failure. The reason I choose to show this picture is that when people in the US see pictures like this, the things that they've said to us in response to asking for compassion around that cuts to foreign aid. They say, this is a fat child. Why would we get, I mean, it isn't just the loss of support, it's the anger and the vehemence that's directed towards children who have nothing. And so these were just some pictures that day. And I remember rounding in the pediatric ward, which was very busy and everyone was overwhelmed. And sort of after rounds, when our Burundian colleague doctor went to go to the outpatient clinic, the nurse pulled me aside. She said, we have 20 packets of food left. What are we going to do? And I mean, it's hard to describe how incredibly awful that felt. And so mothers who are amazing bring their children every day to our very busy malnutrition clinic. This is just a picture of a child who was also there that day. The nurse is measuring and weighing him. This is another baby who, he has this sort of rusty blonde hair that's characteristic of kwashiorkor, being served by our nurses. So this isn't a new problem in Burundi. And as Bart mentioned, there's been a real revolution in how we tackle this, and it's usually done by giving children something that the medical name is ready to use therapeutic food, or RUTF, but we call it amped up peanut butter. So it's basically a peanut-based supplement that has additional vitamins and minerals in there. And it used to be that malnourished children came to the hospital and stayed there for months at a time because we had to give them milk-based products. But when ready-to-use therapeutic food was developed about 20 years ago, it revolutionized the treatment of children with malnutrition. So this food can be given, once you're sure the child can eat it, and most of them like it because it tastes like peanut butter. The child can be sent home with 150 packs, which is what each child requires to get them through the period of acute malnutrition. And in Burundi, this ready-to-use therapeutic food was exclusively supplied by USAID. And so the day we heard about the USAID cuts, we were told you have to use only what's in your warehouse, whatever you have, and there's no more coming to you. And so we scrambled. We looked at opening the packets. Could we divide them into thirds? We had many more children on the ward who were in desperate need of this food than we had food. And overnight, the rug was pulled out from under us. And yeah, it was one of the saddest days I've ever experienced as a healthcare provider. And I know our nurses, our community health workers, the other doctors felt the same way, because there were mothers who had brought their babies to us asking for help. It seemed like a relatively straightforward thing to do. And then overnight, we were unable, we found ourselves in a position where we were going to be unable to help them. So we had less than 200 packs of ready-to-use therapeutic food that we were able to scrounge up during that first week. And as I mentioned, for a full course of recovery, a child needs 150 packs. And this was happening on the same day that the M23 rebels, so this rebel group in Congo, was marching down the east coast of Congo, and refugees were fleeing across the border into Burundi. So about 80,000 refugees arrived. So no more ready-to-use therapeutic food, malnourished children everywhere, refugees arriving, and a government that USAID was less than 1% of the US government saying, meh, we can't keep spending. Americans need this money. So we realized how frail the system was. Like, that one election in one country could change and upend everything overnight. But we didn't want to be stuck in our depression and our sadness and the frailty of the system, but we wanted to follow Deo's lead and be motivated to action. And so we saw this really as an opportunity to invest in local agriculture and to build a system that didn't rely on outside support, right? So we wanted to invest in our community, to have our farmers be the ones growing the peanuts that could make this amped up peanut butter. And this is something we talked about for a while, but because the USAID was providing the food that we needed, the ready-to-use therapeutic food, we felt we had to target our resources elsewhere, right? So we didn't really we wanted to invest in this long ago, but the abrupt pulling out the rug from under us led us to say, now is the time. It's time to invest in this community and to produce this here in Burundi, not just for the kids in Kigutu, but everywhere. We also actually felt quite qualified to do this. We're really lucky in Burundi and Kigutu that we have a lot of South-South collaboration. So colleagues from other countries like Haiti, like South Africa, where they come to Burundi to provide the support there. And many of them have faced similar challenges that Burundi is facing. And so this kind of solidarity and training can become really important. So this idea, it's called Medica Mamba, which means peanut medicine. And this was actually piloted in Haiti, where you don't need the USAID peanut butter anymore, because you can grow groundnuts or peanuts. Groundnuts is what they're called in most places. And with training and support and the right facilities, you can make your own ready-to-use therapeutic food. And the collateral benefits that go along with this, right? You employ people, you have skills training, you buy products from your farmers, so you stimulate the local economy. And so Medica Mamba, it just seemed like the right answer to us. So we have a really committed team in Burundi. These are some of our pediatric nurses who are, working on putting together some therapeutic foods for our babies, because we ran out. But we don't just give up, right? So they're really committed. But the resources financially and in terms of solidarity were something that we've been lacking, and we're just so grateful to all of you at Alongside Hope for this partnership. Some people have asked me, what are you doing in the meantime, right? While you're building this facility, how are you helping your kids? And what I mostly say is, we follow the lead of our brave mothers, right? These mothers bring their babies to us. They climb a hill. They walk for 7 miles because they want their babies to live. And so they're our inspiration. We never give up. We're constantly looking. My colleagues in Burundi could probably tell you more than I could about this, for ways to compassionately and dignified feed the masses. We were lucky in that the group that was providing USAID. So one of the ironic things about the funding cuts to USAID is that most of the money that the US government provided USAID went back into the US economy, right? So the peanuts that were used to make USAID ready-to-use therapeutic food were actually grown in Georgia. And so it was peanut farmers in the US who were getting the financial benefits. And after we wrote the piece in Time Magazine, we were actually contacted by Malnutrition, which is a great partner and provider of ready-to-use therapeutic food, who said, listen, we have millions of dollars worth of this that's now rotting, right? That's the misery of what the US government did, right? Overnight, they said no more, but that meant that food that was already in existence and committed was set to rot in ports. I mean, while there were starving children, and it's really mind-boggling to me sometimes. So Manna donated some of the ready-to-use therapeutic food to us to help us get over this hump. We've been using more milk-based supplies, but these are costly. We didn't budget for it. We're, like I said, we follow the lead of the mothers, and we're being asked to help nationally, because it isn't just in Kigutu, it's all over the country where they're having this challenge. So there's, a lot going on. And so I just want to end by thanking you all, and really just a final comment, which is that this is something that my mentor, Paul Farmer, used to call pragmatic solidarity, right? That people who are hungry need food. And so finding ways and partners and allies in these dark times who share our beliefs that children everywhere, that mothers everywhere deserve the same support that children and mothers in North America deserve, it's incredible, and who are willing to commit to providing that. But I want to say, one of the things that struck me the first time I went to Kigutu was that this community is a deeply spiritual community as well. So often we talk about the needs, and that's because, we want to get the people the things that they need. But Kigutu is a community that's very rich in terms of its people and its spirituality. And these are just some pictures from the church nearby, which is always a very busy, active place. And the little cans, the little containers at the bottom, those are called jerry cans. This is how people get water in the community, right? And so those things probably weigh about 7 kilos, 6 to 7 kilos. And young girls are often, you see them carrying this. And so this is a very precious resource. And they brought them to the church to be blessed, to be used as holy water, right? And so there is a spiritual dimension to this community that is very striking. And I think that spiritual dimension that you all are bringing as well, by saying, we are not going to sit idly by while your children starve. Like, I can't stress to you all how much that means to the people in Kigutu, like that a group of people all the way across the world in Canada would care about them at a time when a very powerful country is saying we don't care. It just means so much. So it's not just the support of the ready-to-use therapeutic food that we'll now be able to make in Burundi because of your partnership, but it's that sense of saying, we see you and you matter to us, that world has not forgotten your plight, and that we're stronger when we're together. Like, I can't tell you what that means to our patients, to all of us. And so I just want to close by saying, I think in getting ready for this talk, I was really, it's a very emotional topic, and something I think we all care very deeply about. But this quote from Matthew really struck me as saying, I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it for me. And sorry. It's very emotional to find this kind of connection with all of you and with our community in Burundi. So I'm going to stop there. This is a picture of me with some of the patients and our amazing doctors. And this is my email here. You can feel free to reach out to me at any time. And I'm going to stop there because I think Bart also has a video to show from Kigutu and from our founders. So thanks for your time and your patience.
Jennifer, thank you so much for that passionate and moving presentation. Really appreciate it. And thank you for all that you do with your colleagues at Village Health Works. I think actually it's Janice who's going to share a short video, which is a message from Dr. Deo Gracias. And it's just brief. I think it's about 2 minutes long, and it'll give all of you online a chance to think about any questions you might have, because we'll follow the video with a bit of time for questions and answers. So Janice, are you ready to roll the video?
Yes, indeed.
Hello, my name is Deogracias Nizonkiza. I serve as a founder and the CEO of Village Healthworks. I'm very excited to be working with alongside Hope in his effort to make food, healthy food that will address malnutrition that has been decimating our children in Burundi. You know, whenever there is a problem sometimes, it can be, the way I see it, an opportunity to actually come up with lasting solutions. This collaboration between Village Healthworks and alongside Hope to be able to produce our own peanut porridge is so important. It really may change a lot of the ways we used to do things, depending on what is produced locally and grown locally. It's just the way it should have been from the very beginning. And this is going to be such an inspiration and an eye-opening experience for so many people.
Thanks, Janice. And I think Dr. Deogracias is actually with us today. Are you there, Deo? I see his name on one of the Hollywood squares, but he may have stepped away. But grateful that he joined us, at least for a time. We have some time for questions and answers. I see there's a lovely comment there in the chat from Shireen to you, Jennifer, and to Bart. Another by Vanessa. And she asks, brilliant work, thanks for the presentations. What are the biggest barriers to our countries producing their own RUTF locally? What key factors need to be addressed to facilitate this localized approach to acute malnutrition treatment? Jennifer, would you have some thoughts on that?
Hi, sorry. This is Cynthia Riaz from Village Healthworks. I just wanted to let you know that I'm using Deo's account and he's currently traveling. But thank you so very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
No worries, cleverly disguised. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Dr. Furin.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne, and thanks for the question and the kind comments that you've all provided. It really is a balm to the soul to be with some like-minded folks here. So, there's a few different barriers that we see. So the first is that countries that rely on ready-to-use therapeutic food usually have what seem like limited resources to try to put into health and wellness in their countries. And when there's a big organization like USAID that's saying, hey, we've got this covered, right? It's hard to say, okay, well, never mind. We're just going to try to find, $500,000 somewhere else to build our own plant, right? And so it's like you can't catch up, right? And so in many ways, the monopoly, right, that USAID had on this ready-to-use therapeutic food was a barrier, right? Because it was there, they gave it to us, and a lot of people in the US were subsidized based on that. So that was certainly one barrier. But the second is, are you in a place that can grow ground nuts, right? We're very lucky in Burundi that we can grow ground nuts, but some economies can't. So that was something. And then the third thing is sort of the know-how, right? Like a lot of folks that know how to do this want to sort of protect their investment. And so they would rather, be getting these big contracts from USAID to produce than sharing the technology. And so that's where we're very thankful for our Haitian colleagues, right? Who are like, we know how to do this. We've done this in Haiti. And Haiti has always had a complicated relationship with the US government for a variety of reasons. And so, they've had to sort of find their own way on a lot of fronts. And so having the South-South collaboration has been amazing. And then it is that initial investment, right? And having to deal with malnutrition at a period of time when you're trying to build something. But Village Healthworks is great at this. And the community said, we want this, we need this, and we think it'll be a good way forward. But which is why we're grateful for partners who also see the vision in this, because not everybody does. So.
And Jennifer, I remember you mentioning previously that there are some models for local production elsewhere in Africa as well. Is that correct?
That's right. There are some colleagues who do smaller scale production in Uganda, in Congo, in Rwanda, who are also, sort of sharing tips for the trade, right? And so we're very thankful for that. There will be some, some learning along the way, because nothing like this has ever been done before in Burundi. So, we're very thankful to have expertise and know-how from the local landscape as well on a smaller scale, which will then translate into we hope, a larger scale response, and then hopefully inspire other countries to do the same thing, right? Like, it was devastating what happened with USAID, but it exposed a frailty in a system that was really unexcusable, right? Like, that one government could wreak all this damage. So we're hoping that this can be inspiration, not just around malnutrition, but around a lot of other health issues that were really hit hard when the US government did the terrible things that it's doing.
Thank you. I noticed there was a bit of back and forth in the chat about how long Alongside Hope will be supporting this particular project, and looks like it continues through at least till mid next year. And so will likely, as Janice noted, be featured in our World of Gifts catalog this fall. And then there's a question here from Joy Gothard. Are Burundi farmers able to produce the same volume of RUTF product? And if so, when? What's the timeline?
Yeah, it's a great question. So they've never been asked to do this before. And so we're not sure, how quickly we can get them up to scale. Our goal is to have, the plant up and doing its first runs of production by the end of the year. Some of that will obviously depend on funding, but the farmers are ready to go now, right? This is, one of the things we saw in Haiti when we did this at Partners in Health is that the farmers were thrilled not only to have, a crop that they knew could generate income for them, but that it would be going into feeding the children of their communities. Like, there was just such a sense of joy and pride in that. It's a hard job, as many of you might imagine, or probably know from your own experience farming. And so to have this, partnership that could then be reinvested in their kids was great. So, I think the part that's hardest for everyone right now, and maybe not saying it is, in this time where we're figuring this out and getting things up to scale, I mean, kids are dying, and that's the sad reality of this. And it is devastating. It is a heartbreak. But we hope to honor their lives and make their deaths have some meaning by doing this with all of you. Whereas before it's just like, these kids are going to die. They're dying through cruelty, right? Like, I mean, it's so unnecessary, and it's so not this is no money to the US government. And so which is why, Suzanne, your prayer at the beginning was so amazing to me, because it is a very dark time. And so standing up to, appreciating our now, as you say, is saying this is not acceptable to us, and bearing witness as this happens, even though it's terribly painful. But, you know, appreciating the solidarity miracles that come when you can join forces with people who share values around this stuff. So this has just been amazing for us, even though, yeah, there will be children who die because of this.
A couple of other questions. One from the person cleverly disguised as Deo. What amount of funding is needed to help support these efforts to achieve and sustain the goals to make this food production possible? And I think asking specifically about this project.
Yeah, I think the business plan that our team put together, and I know part of it is, you know, what we're going to be working on too with some of the technical expertise from Alongside Hope. The business plan is around 650,000 just to get the facility up and going this year.
That's US.
Yep, sorry. Yes, that's US dollars. Sorry, everyone. And I think like the US dollar is tanking a little bit, so I'm not sure what the Canadian equivalent is. Sorry.
It already tanked, so
yeah.
It's a bit more. Yeah, thank you. Question from Jane. Will monthly giving through Alongside Hope help or be important for village health needs? Carolyn, would you be able to tackle that one?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jane, for that question. Monthly giving always helps because it's predictable and it helps us plan and it helps our partners plan. So yes, thanks for mentioning that. Monthly giving is very, very important. Monthly gifts can go for our general fund, which gives us the ability to use the funds where they're needed most, which would be including Village Healthworks. And you can also designate monthly giving if you want it specifically to go to Village Healthworks. When the project ends, we would just have to look at that and think about a different designation or think about changing that to general funds at that point.
Thanks, Carolyn. Are there any other questions? And don't feel you have to just type them into the chat. You can also raise a hand. I see Bart has raised a hand. No?
I was just providing an example.
Oh, an example of how to
raise
raise
a hand.
Yes. There's also the little raised hand function down there under React, I believe it is. Yeah. So, because I can't see all the Hollywood squares at the same time. So just give it a minute if anyone has a question, or just unmute and shout out.
And maybe also while we're waiting, while people are formulating any questions, I know I think my colleagues in Burundi are still on the line. I don't know if our country director, Jacqueline Saint-Fleur, or other colleagues have anything they want to say or mention. I hate to like call them out on the spot, but it's yeah, if anyone has anything they'd like to say. Thanks, Jack, Nassar, Christina.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, everyone, for your support to Village Healthworks. So the whole team here, thank you for everything. And Jen, your presentation was very amazing. I was texting you actually when you asked me to say something. Yeah, so as you know, with the ongoing situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo and in the US also, why you are now, there are many organizations that are facing some financial issues. And we at Village Healthworks, we are receiving more patients, including kids under 5. You already showed the numbers. And at the same time, regarding the situation in the Republic Democratic of Congo, we have many patients that are showing up here. They are coming from the Republic Democratic of Congo. 2 more, Christina and I, we are planning to visit a camp where we have been asked to go and see what kind of support that we can provide. Because the fact that now USAID doesn't support many NGOs and the government, and the price of healthcare is skyrocketing, and we at Village Efforts we are providing everything almost free to everyone. And so it's a good time to everyone to put ourselves together to see how we can address some chronic issues like malnutrition. So thank you everyone for your support, and the whole team on behalf of the leadership of the organization. We thank you for everything that you are doing, and hopefully we will do our best to make sure that we manage like every single penny, and to make sure that our patients, the kids, they get what they are supposed to get. I don't know, Christina, if you have anything to say. No, Christina doesn't have anything to say at all. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jack. And again, Dr. Sanfleur is our, he's our country director, and he is one of the reasons we have some of the expertise to do this in Burundi right now, because he did this in Haiti.
Well, thank you so much, Jack. I see there's another question there. Will growing groundnuts reduce the supply of other foods?
It's a great question, right? And that's one of the reasons why we need to approach this slowly with the community at the same time that it's an emergency, right? Is that we don't want to move people away from their subsistence agriculture that they're using to feed their family into a model that then deprives these families, right, of other food. And so this is where our strong links to the community come in very handy, because we can work with farmers, community health workers to understand what production needs to be kept for feeding families and subsistence, and what sense of production can be moved over into this sort of economic investment as well. And again, this was a question that came up in Haiti, so we're lucky to have our Haitian teams there, but that will require some planning. And one of the things Village Healthworks has really an expert team in sort of agricultural land management and nutrition. So for example, I didn't mention it, but we provided over 71,000 meals to children in school last year. And so, understanding the local crops and the local feeding needs is something that's important and that we remain committed to. It's another reason why being based in the community matters, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't have your hands and your roots understanding the risk. So, but it's a great question, and we will work hard to make sure we mitigate any measures along those lines that could be impacted.
Thanks. I noticed that the link to to donate to the Resilience Fund has been put up in the chat a couple of times, and also if you went to our website, you could find it there easily. Any other questions? Oh, Bart has a hand up.
Thank you, Dr. Furin. That's awesome. I just have a question. One thing that we talk about internally at Alongside Hope is a lot of the imagery associated with this initiative is very difficult, but it's very real. But understanding how we can best reflect the inherent dignity that human beings have and the right to that dignity is extremely important. And so just suggestions or ideas, because I think one of the greatest things about this is if you see the before and after, I mean, there's nothing more inspiring than seeing what this product can do and the miracle that it is. But how can we at Alongside Hope, I think, communicate with the inherent dignity and respect of the people subjects.
Yeah. It's a great question, Bart. It's one we talk about a lot too, because while we want to convey the need and how these kind of interventions can be helpful, we recognize we're working with vulnerable populations, and like the last thing we want to do is like show things that, like, I don't know, in medicine we call it like medical porn almost, right? It's like this gawking at people's misery. And so again, we're very fortunate in that all of our images are taken with input from the community and guided by community members. We were fortunate this past summer to have an incredibly gifted photographer named Robin Bowman, who came out and pro bono took portraits. She's a very famous portrait photographer, actually, who's worked with vulnerable communities, allowing them to describe how they want their portraits taken. And she actually teamed up with a young woman from our school there. Her name is Princha Senga. So they took those images. And they're very thoughtful and mindful about how they portray them and getting permission. And so, but it is important, we don't want to stigmatize people. But I think most of the families that our community health workers have talked to us said, we're suffering, right? We don't want this sugar coated, right? Like our dignity would be if our kids didn't look like this because they had enough to eat, right? That's where the dignity is. So if having images showing our plight helps other people relate to that and find their compassion, then that's what matters to us more. Yeah, I guess just trying to reassure people about that. And all the images that we provide were taken with full permission and with mindfulness about how do you want your family, your child to be portrayed. There's always a gut check with the community, which is something I really love about Village Healthworks, because not everybody does that.
Thank you. Thanks so much. We're kind of coming to the end of time, our time together, but just want to note that our colleague Richard Leibrock has put a couple of interesting comments in about the agricultural benefits, right? The benefits to the soil of growing groundnuts or peanuts. There's Christina has also put into the chat a link to the photography work that Dr. Furin mentioned of Robin. And Janice has something to add, and then I think we'll close with a prayer.
Thanks, Suzanne. I just saw Jasmine's question, and it's fitting that Christina had posted Robin's portfolio. So Jasmine had asked if people can use the photos in their churches for promotional purposes. You can use the photos that Alongside Hope is using. Please don't go to Robin's website and use those without seeking permission, but you can use the photos that that we have worked with Alongside Hope or with Village Healthworks to collaborate in promoting for this project. So that's a great question, Jasmine. Thanks for that.
So a big thank you to Dr. Furin and to colleagues at Village Healthworks, as well as to my colleagues at Alongside Hope for a very fine webinar. I want to end actually with a brief reflection. And so invite you to enter into a reflective moment with me as we finish. You'll notice that our new name contains the word hope. We've been talking a lot about that today. And we've also been talking about how it can be a challenge to discern signs of hope in this time. One of my late father, Gavin Rumsey's favorite sayings was, "We live in hope." In December 2008, he preached a sermon marking the 50th anniversary of his ordination to the diaconate. And he said, "You know that hope has a kind of surface meaning and then a deep meaning. I have a hope that there may be chocolate cake with chocolate icing at the coffee hour. I think my hope is based on rumors. But there is a deep hope, as you know. It's the wellspring of life. When you are treated with respect and dignity, it sows a seed of hope in your heart. That love that goes out to you is saying, I'm okay, life is okay, I can face the challenge of life. And that seed of hope grows in you. When you treat others with respect and dignity, it plants the seed of hope in their hearts. And they can live in this ambiguous world, which is so beautiful and so terrible. You give hope, you receive hope. It is a precious gift. Amen. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.